So let's start now a new session about cities and mobility. I ask Isabelle Collin, who is Nudge Unit Director at the SNCF. I ask Marc Rigolo, who is the General Manager at Fondation Maïf, and my friend, my old friend, my 40 years friend, Emmanuel Logno, CEO of Quartus, to join this new session.
Have a seat. This roundtable will be moderated by Marie-Laure Soubils, who is in charge of transport and mobility.
Marie-Laure Soubils.
Make
some progress in French.
I'm making progress,
please.
but I'm going to start giving you notes on English. I got to be careful. He's my boss. And Marie-Laure is the head of transport and mobility at BVA here in France, and she's really an expert in mobility and customer experience. And so she will lead this roundtable in French, but of course you have the opportunity to listen in English as well through simultaneous translation. Send any of your questions in French or English, or maybe a couple of other languages, into the chat, and they will put those onto the screen for Marie-Laure when we come to the question and answer at the end. Take it away, Marie-Laure.
So, greetings to all. Thank you for being with us. Before we discuss the subject, maybe just a brief introduction in order for you to understand what your challenges and missions are within your organizations. Hi, I'm in charge of a foundation called La Fondation Maïf, which is a foundation run by an insurance company, which is there to provide research and support to the scientific community in the prevention of occupational hazards and accidents. So we work in the field of experimentation on these issues such as mobility, digital risk, and so on. So pretty broad sweeping. So hi, I'm in charge of the Nudge Unit of SNCF Francilien, the first innovation lab dedicated to behavioral sciences in the world of French public transport. So it's something that's very special. Francilien is an operator that carries 3.4 million passengers every day in the Paris region, with a great number of challenges in terms of passenger experience. That's our roadmap in terms of behavioral sciences. Emmanuel? So Emmanuel Logno, president of Quartus. Quartus is a French property developer, probably number 10 in France, slightly under 1 billion euros in revenues. So we build logistics facilities, office space, and housing. So the Anglo-Saxons actually call this job property developer, but we also have a property holding company. In fact, we are in charge of making the city. So first question for all of you. Why did you choose to develop behavioral sciences within your organizations? What triggered that a few years back? What made you think that behavioral sciences can really help on a daily basis? Emmanuel. Sure, I'll start. For me, it's a pretty easy answer because I have a very old friend, as you may have understood, whose name is Eric Singler, who always does things and is always really committed to what he does, and he really goes in depth, and it usually trickles down to his friends, and I'm a very curious man, so I thought, wow, that sounds really interesting, all of that stuff that he's working on. And what could the implications of that be, behavioral sciences, in my own profession? So I thought long and hard about that, and we thought about it together with Eric, with BVA,
pour la suite, j'imagine.
I suppose we're going to say more about that in a while.
Oui, alors c'est
Isabelle?
en 2015 qu'on a commencé à
So we
s'intéresser
started taking an
à ce sujet.
interest
On a
in
entendu parler du nudge, des
these
sciences
issues in
comportementales.
2015. We
Et
heard
on
about
s'est dit que ça
behavioral
pouvait être
sciences
intéressant
and
pour
nudge,
traiter un certain
and
nombre
we
de
thought it
problématiques
might
qu'on
be
peut avoir
interesting
qui sont liées au
to
comportement des voyageurs, qui sont
handle a number of
des
issues we
préjugés
have
en
with
termes de
consumer
performance
behavior, which are
voilà, la gestion de
very
flux, la
important.
manière dont on
Flow
informe nos clients.
management, the manner in which we
Et
provide
donc,
information.
on a fait une première étude sur
We
la
conducted
mobilité du
a
quotidien. On a
first
commencé à
survey
apprendre un
on
petit peu.
mobility,
On a
daily
commencé à
mobility.
s'intéresser sur
We
l'influence que
started
peuvent avoir nos environnements,
thinking about
nos
how our
trams, nos gares, sur
environments,
la manière dont
trains,
c'est
and rail
configuré. Donc, ça
stations,
peut
their
avoir une influence sur
configuration
les
could have an
comportements.
influence
On a
on
commencé à
passenger
s'intéresser à
behavior.
l'influence
We
des
also
autres
started to be
voyageurs,
interesting on the
qui
influence
peuvent
of
avoir
other
aussi
passengers,
voilà, une incidence sur
which
les
can also
décisions
have
individuelles,
effects on
qu'elles soient
individual
conscientes ou non.
decisions, be they
On
conscious
a
or
commencé à
not.
comprendre aussi qu'on
We gained a
s'adressait
better
beaucoup à notre
understanding
voyageur
that
en système 2,
we
de façon
used
très
system
rationnelle,
2 a lot, a very
alors que
rational
finalement c'est beaucoup le
way
système
to
1
talk
qui
to
est
our
sollicité d'une manière
passengers, while
générale, mais dans le
system
transport
1
du
is
quotidien, faut
very
imaginer que
important,
c'est encore
including
plus
in public
important.
transport.
Donc voilà, un certain nombre de
So,
germes de réflexion. Et puis
We
on a
really
commencé à
started
mener
thinking
le
about these
premier
issues
projet,
and then
alors plus
launched
dans un
our
premier
first
temps sur
project. It
l'orientation des
was
voyageurs dans
initially
la
about
gare. Voilà, donc mieux les guider, mieux
rotation
les
of passengers,
accompagner,
orientation
alerter
of
en amont.
passengers
On
in
a
the
appris
rail
pas mal de
station.
choses. Et puis
We
depuis,
done
eh ben,
quite a
on en a
few
fait un vrai levier
things,
de
and
transformation. On
we've
traite
now
pas mal
made
de
it a true lever of
problématiques.
transformation,
On a
working
fait
on a
plus de
great
50
many
projets
issues, more than
qui
50
appliquent les sciences
projects
comportementales et on va en parler.
involving behavioral sciences.
Marc.
Marc?
Alors nous, donc on s'occupe de la prévention des risques.
So we're
Alors,
in
c'est un
charge
domaine
of,
un petit peu
we work on
complexe
risk
et
prevention,
pour lequel il
which
est
is a very
assez
complex field,
difficile d'atteindre
for which
les
it's very
cinq,
difficult
signaux vitaux verts
to
qu'on a vus
reach
tout
the
à l'heure,
5 green
parce que
vital
ce sont souvent
signals,
des choses qui
because
sont liées à des politiques publiques dans
this is
lesquelles
often
le
connected to public
décideur n'est pas
policies in
forcément
which
celui qui
decision
met en
makers are
œuvre,
not
n'est pas
necessarily
forcément celui
those
qui
who
va s'occuper des
implement
dégâts par la suite.
or those who take
Si on
care
construit
of
en zone inondable, le
remediate the
décideur,
damage. If
ça
you
n'est pas
build
forcément celui qui va construire,
something
et
in a
s'il y a des
zone
problèmes,
that
c'est
is
pas
prone to
forcément le maire qui va
floods,
venir vous sortir de la panade,
it's
ce sont
not
des
the mayor
services
who's
publics.
given you
Donc on est sur
planning
des sujets
permission
assez
who's
complexes et on se
necessarily
rend
going to
compte,
help you
on s'est rendu compte que sur
get
tous les
out of
travaux
the
qu'on
mess.
faisait,
But what we noted was that
finalement, on
on a
travaillait
lot
beaucoup
of
depuis très longtemps sur,
fields on which
d'abord,
we
sur la
were working
connaissance
on,
des
we've
sciences
worked a
dures, à quel
lot
moment se
on
produit
the
l'accident,
hard
pour quelle
science
raison,
and why
inondation,
accidents
l'accident de voiture, peu
happen,
importe. Mais aussi
be
que
it road accidents
on
or any
était
other type of
dans la
accident.
logique qui vient d'être évoquée sur le fait que
And
à partir du moment où on dit à
in
quelqu'un si tu
fact,
construis là,
if
comme
you
tu es
say,
dans la
okay, if you
rivière, c'est le
build
monde
this
qui va être
this
inondé,
house
il
here,
était évident qu'il n'allait pas construire là.
it'll be flooded.
Sauf que c'est pas ce qu'on voit. Et c'est la même chose si
In
on
logical
dit
way,
il vaut mieux
people
mettre un
would
casque à
not build
vélo,
there.
ou si on vous dit il vaut
Or
mieux
in
pas
the same way
traverser
as it's
1
better
kilomètre quand le feu est vert
not
pour
to
l'autre
cross
voie.
on your kick scooter
Malheureusement, ça change pas forcément
when
le
the lights are
comportement. Et donc ça,
red.
c'est vraiment un
But
problème.
that
Donc on voit
doesn't
bien que le
necessarily
sujet est
change
vraiment
people's
lié de
behavior. So
l'accident
it's really
aujourd'hui est lié au
something
comportement humain.
that is
Et dans les
deeply
domaines qu'on
connected to
aborde,
human
on s'est aussi rendu
behaviors.
compte que les
And we
messages
also
un peu
noticed
descendants de
that
sensibilisation,
top-down
d'information pédagogique qui
messages,
venaient du haut et qui
education
pendant
from
longtemps pour notre
above,
génération étaient des messages qui étaient écoutés,
which
voire mis
for
en
our
place. Ça nous
generation
apprenait à
we
regarder à
thought
gauche puis à droite pour traverser la rue,
was
etc.,
very
etc.
important, how you could
On se
look
rend compte
left and
aujourd'hui avec
right
la
before
génération qui
crossing the
arrive
street, but with
que ces
the
messages sont moins
up-and-coming
écoutés, que
generation,
c'est lié à un
they
environnement
listen to these
médiatique
messages
qui est une
less.
profusion
Perhaps
d'informations, à l'existence de fake
it's
news,
because of
à un
fake
affaiblissement
news or a
de
weakening
l'institution, à une défiance plus grande
of
vers les messages
public
officiels. Bref, tout ça
institutions or
cumulé fait
official
que
messages. All
on
of
doit
that
travailler
means
sur le
that we need to
comportement
work
humain dans un contexte un peu
with
délicat,
human
parce que
behaviors in
finalement, en
a
expliquant ce
rather
qui se passe,
touchy
ça ne suffit
environment,
pas
because
pour éviter les accidents
explaining
et parfois les
risks
accidents
is
graves.
not sufficient to
Alors,
prevent
on va
accidents,
continuer,
including
je
serious
dirais, sur la
accidents.
lancée pour que vous nous présentiez un petit peu plus en détail, Marc,
Okay, so
des exemples de
could
nudge
you
que
give
vous
us a
avez mis
few
en place, les
examples of
résultats que
nudge
vous
that
avez
you have
obtenus à
used
travers
and
ces
results
nudges.
obtained?
Et normalement, je vais voir un petit
And I think
PowerPoint
we have a
qui va
little
s'afficher.
PowerPoint
On le
slideshow
verra, nous, sur le retour, mais avec,
that's going
voilà,
to come up on the
parfait, donc
screen,
comme ça, et vous avez le retour si vous voulez.
Bah, c'est parfait.
and you
Voilà.
can have a look if you
Alors
like.
d'abord peut-être dire que moi j'ai eu la
So
chance de
perhaps I could
rencontrer
start by
l'équipe
saying that I
Nova,
was
notamment
fortunate enough to meet the BVA
Étienne qui est
team
là-haut, et
and
aussi que
Etienne,
je suis
who's
quelqu'un
up
de curieux,
there.
j'ai découvert un monde en me disant, mais finalement, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas
And
moyen
I
d'agir
thought,
pour
could we
protéger les
not
gens
act to
avec ces
protect
outils-là, puisque finalement,
people
en le faisant comme on le
through
fait
these
de manière
tools?
assez classique, on est peu efficace.
Because the
Et donc on
conventional
a cherché
methods
un
aren't
moment un
very
terrain
effective. So
d'expérimentation pour
we
vérifier si ça pouvait marcher ou comment ça pouvait
tried to
marcher.
look into how
Et on
we
en a
could
trouvé un avec avec le port
explore
de
that,
la
and
ceinture
we
dans les cartes
saw
scolaires.
the issue of wearing seatbelts in school buses. It's not buses in cities, it's really school buses which go around villages to pick up students and take them to school. And the rate of people wearing seatbelts, of kids wearing seatbelts, vary wildly, but they're very low. Since 2003, it's been made mandatory. Since 2015, all bus operators were asked to add safety belts, seat belts to the buses, and in fact, no one controls that. So it works with very small kids, because the parents or teachers are there to force them to wear the seat belt. But bigger ones, very few wear the seat belts. So we were talking about the precision, the accuracy of the question asked is how could we improve the wearing of seat belts? And in fact, for a great many years, there have been huge awareness-raising campaigns with parents, teachers, students, and so on. And the rate hasn't really moved at all. So,
J'ai perdu l'image, mais elle va revenir.
I've lost the picture, but we'll be back in a second. So, a very structured manner of working. We work with Keolis, which is a subsidiary of SNCF, and a non-profit called ANATEP, and we tried to see if we could imagine nudges. So a lot of the work consisted in listening, trying to understand the behavioral mechanisms that led to kids not wearing the seatbelt. Sometimes you can't see them because they're hidden behind the seats, or the grown-ups don't wear it because it's not nice, or they feel safe in a bus and feel that nothing can happen to them in a school bus. So we worked on all of these mechanisms to try and invent nudges. Here are a few nudges there. You have a nudge here which is both when you get onto the bus, with sound, with characters that show that you can be injured in a bus, the proportionality through the posters. You can see that there's bigger than a bus, in fact, a truck essentially, and then we measured all of that, we tested a lot of it, we mixed. We had trios of nudges to see what worked best, measured before the nudge, and after the nudge, and then over time. So 2 weeks later, what were the effects of the nudge? And in fact, what we noted in terms of the results is, first of all, often you can expect to fail, but here it worked because the average across the 6 experimentations conducted, we had an average of, there was an average of 10% of seatbelt wearing in these buses, and it up to 24%. So multiplied by 2.4 times, without controls, without surveillance. And interestingly, it was just as effective for boys as it was for girls, and it persisted in time. So it's not a very costly system because it's the malacie, the sort of badly seated. It's this kind of little fluorescent item that you place over the seat belt, like in an aircraft, meaning that it's actually unrolled and on the seat, so no problem with visibility of the seat belt. And in fact, the seat belt, if you don't wear it, you need to sit on it, and it's a bit annoying. And if you remove it, it dangles, so it's an annoyance too. So improving, and a very significant improvement of the rates. And Keolis in the Rhône-Alpes region is currently scaling up, implementing that in all of its school buses. Thank you. So another universe, another example, Isabelle. you have a big field of experimentation, an almost unlimited number of potential users. What could you present in terms of experimentation? Well, we tested a number of things, but I'm just going to show you three. One for forgotten luggage, which is a real pain in France, intensified since COVID. People forget their stuff unintentionally on board trains, forget their belongings. Of course, it's a very complex matter. So there was a whole protocol with a preliminary study, and we thought we could probably work on values of solidarity and mutual help, of collective values. In fact, to try to value the collective aspect, the fact that you're being together in a train can also help you to tell people that they're forgetting their stuff. So we had very large posters. I won't go into the behavioral concepts there, but you have System 1 there, the text that you need to fill in yourself, and then also audio messages, and we increased the number of abandoned objects from 12 to 42%, the reporting of these forgotten bags. And then another one, improve cleanliness in rail stations. This is a nudge that worked quite well. There was a bit of an issue in some areas of the rail station where there's less social control than places where there are more people, where there's more footfall. So there was a little bit of a problem, to say things nicely. People tended to urinate in, say, the dark corners of the station. And through behavioral sciences, we reworked these locations. We gave them a new function with a virtual presence that reintroduces social control there. Sports, an audience, meaning that you feel less on your own there and tend to behave better. And we tested that over time, and these are very long-lasting nudges, because very often you think, how long is this nudge going to last? But this one really persisted over long periods of time. So minus 80% urine in these locations on average, and direct return on investment in terms of maintenance, in terms of cleaning, in terms of damage to our equipment. So a very valuable nudge here in terms of efficiency. And a third example about, of course, the safety measures for COVID. COVID was, of course, a huge priority, and it's extremely behavioral in nature, and the big challenge was to encourage people to use these barrier measures. So there it was much more emotional communication, much more universal, something that people need in public transport. So a whole new way of talking to our passengers, much more System 1 focused, 61% of spontaneous memory of that campaign, which is pretty big. I know that you're into consumer research, so you can see how valuable that is, and how interesting it is to focus much more on the visual and the emotional, on something more human than just rational information. Emmanuel? So I don't have any visuals to show, and you can tell us why, but what examples can you share with us today? Well, apart from the fact that Eric is a good friend of mine, maybe I could tell you how we thought that was useful. Today, manufacturing or creating the city of tomorrow is very complicated because people have lost a taste for cities because there's an imbalance between cost and benefits, and then rising interest rates, commodities are more expensive and so on. So making sustainable cities that are affordable, basically with makes them then beautiful too, I suppose, but I won't build on beauty because we haven't yet worked on aesthetics in experimental science. That might be a good thing for the future. All of that's a very complex equation, but it's an ambition that we must have for people to enjoy living in cities once more. So we worked on inclusiveness, how there's energy savings, how you can save that in a housing unit, a building with multiple housing units, how can you in a neighborhood or in a building, how you can recreate social cohesiveness. So we surveyed people to know why they never said hello to their neighbors, why they tended to use the lift rather than the stairs. And so we conducted a number of interviews with several hundred people who lived there with BVA. And then we sat together and had a big nudge lab with our teams and with partners, outside partners too, other stakeholders who also contributed their knowledge. And it resulted in a number of proposals, of nudges, which very importantly we said we would continue to explore for 10 years to really try and assess our progress. I could give you a couple of examples. First, we worked in a first building that we had, and then a second and third, and then maybe we'll also talk later on about the excitement generated within a company around the issues of behavioral sciences, and then perhaps before that, a few of the nudges that really emerged strongly are very simple things like a sticker on a mirror to tell you that when you're brushing your teeth, switch the tap off. How many of you turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth? I always think of the little sticker on our mirrors. I don't have a sticker there, but I think about it and switched off the shower. I have kids, well, they're grown up now, but I had kids who were the age of 15, and I had to kick the door for them to come out of the shower, especially boys. I'm sure that you must have experienced that. So with a startup, we had a shower head that starts flashing green after 7 minutes, because 7 minutes is the average length, the right length for a shower. And then, of course, there's an ethical aspect there, an ethical nudge there. It doesn't switch off the water or suddenly spray freezing cold water on you. There it's just a flashing light. And then in more complex issues of energy savings, of course, we're thinking a lot about heating, but we're talking a lot about that on TV, of course, but new build is very often very well insulated, and in fact, it's hot water that consumes the most energy. Hot water from showers and baths and so on, because a lot of energy is dedicated to keeping that water hot. And the second issue, all of the devices and appliances that are not active but still that are sort of lying idle or on standby, because you really can't be bothered to go around and switch off all of these or unplug all of these things that are on standby. But then with through radio frequency, you can actually have a single switch, and you press that switch, and it cuts off power from all of these standby devices. So that is more in sort of energy consumption aspects. For the social cohesion, the idea was to, you remember sort of Haussmann's Paris was socially mixed, but then social mixity doesn't exist that much because the richer people used to live in the lower floors because you had to go up the stairs, but now with lifts, you can climb up to the top in a lift, and it makes these apartments more attractive. And then there are also these automatic systems that switch off the light in the staircase after 3 minutes, and that stops people from talking in the stairs. So we try and build buildings with large staircases that have natural light. So we're going to try to have more common space, shared spaces that can be better animated, so that there can be more interaction between individuals in these common spaces.
Well, thank you. Before concluding, I have a last question, starting with you, Isabel. When you try to influence behaviors in mass transit, which is what you do with SNCF, do you not think that it has an impact on customer experience and on customer satisfaction? Well, very much so. That's the purpose for us, to improve the customer's experience and well-being. And we're trying to also change the relationship we have with our users. We want more of a hand-in-hand partnership type of approach. We are we provide a public service, but we're all responsible for how public or mass transit operates and works day after day. You know, it's about better living together. It's very much inspired by the notion of public service. Okay. Mark, a last question for you now. In your introduction, you explained that behaviors are changing. You also said that there oftentimes is a gap between the message and the way people effectively behave. How do you think behavioral science is going to help you go further in better managing risks, including new risks? Well, first of all, let me say that it may not always work. I think there are so many silos between people and people who manage crises that responsibility, accountability is diluted. So it is difficult when that is the case to use, nudging. I wasn't here at the very beginning, but we haven't talked much about responsibility. We work on general interest questions. Vaccination, for example, and we are seeing more and more that people are very individualistic in how they behave, and in a sense it privatizes a sense of freedom. But when something goes wrong, they expect the state or emergency workers to help out. So I think the real question behind this is responsibility, and I think that rational decisions must be made influenced by a certain level of responsibility. If you look at what happened this summer. This summer we had massive fires in the southwest of France. To avoid fires, we have to trim trees and cut grass. When a fire starts, the people who don't trim and who don't cut the grass or the brushes near their homes will, they are the first ones who will criticize the firefighters if firefighters don't show up on time. So I think this has an impact on influences insurance companies. And a bit like in California, there are many people, and in France it's the same thing, who can't be insured because insurance companies say no. We will not insure you because we know your house sooner or later will burn.
Emmanuel, vous de votre côté, c'est vrai que lorsque vous concevez
Emmanuel,
un programme,
when you design
vous devez déjà vous
a
informer
real
sur
estate
chercher des
program
tendances,
or a
sur des
building,
programmes
you
à court ou moyen
have to
terme, à
do
5 ans,
look at the
10 ans, pourquoi
latest
pas. Et
trends.
finalement, est-ce que les centres
And
comportementaux vont devenir ou sont
would
déjà
you say
un élément maintenant, une constante
behavioral
dans toutes vos
science
recherches de
is
prédiction,
something
d'application des
you
tendances?
always take into consideration to choose or make your design decisions? You know, and you can have all kinds of great ideas, and you could influence companies with your ideas, and you know, if you have a big voice, people will hear you, but the further away they are from where you are, the less they will hear you. We have always worked hard to get all our people on board, and I think we were quite successful, relatively successful, because we did it while having fun, and people were touched, and people wanted to be part of this. Then I think what also works is the fact that we provide a lot of examples. So with examples, it is easier to illustrate what you're saying. It is easier to influence decision makers or other stakeholders, you know, about a project you're working on. So my industry is very decentralized. Project managers, you know, manage their projects the way they want to manage their projects. You were just talking now about responsibility. Well, I think we have a responsibility as a company when it comes to, you know, things like climate change, social cohesiveness. But we are a very decentralized industry. Some innovations we did not pick up on, others we did. I think this one really propagated very quickly, and today we have several projects in which we are going to use nudging. Always building on what we've done before, and always after taking corrective measures based on our past mistakes. Okay, we have questions also. We have more questions coming in. I have a question for Isabelle and Mark. Have you tested or investigated studies that have a positive impact on motivation? Have you, for example, encouraged people to reduce their subscription to a program, or to simply reduce the price of a product or a commodity you're selling? No, we have worked on incentives, but not with a compensation. Very much with non-for-profit organizations, and we've had some interesting nudges that work very well. I think it very much depends on the topic. Each project is different, but I think it is important to provide some sort of recognition for pro-social behaviors. For ethical reasons, we are very cautious when it comes to providing compensation. You know, the bonus or malus concept for insurance companies. If you're a bad driver, you pay more. If you're a good driver, you pay less. And this has a positive impact on collective driving behaviors. insurance companies also use deductibles. Sometimes you pay a higher deductible if your behavior was not appropriate. That is another example. I don't think, however, that this fundamentally changes how people behave. I think it can sometimes improve behaviors when a program is in place, but not otherwise. I think you take at-risk areas. The insurance systems are very complex. At-risk areas are cheaper sometimes. If you go to the notary, we are informed that you're in an at-risk area, and sometimes people won't change their mind, they want to buy. So real estate agents, the person selling, local elected representatives, they will sometimes deliberately hide certain facts. So we as an insurance company can then respond to that, but sometimes the impact we can have is very limited. I think it's interesting to use comparative bills, bad or good bills, comparative bills, where they can compare to improve their bill and move out of the bad bill area and get closer to the good bill. What you all three have in common is also the relationships to others. In a building, people live together. It is interesting to create connections in the common areas. In mass transit, same thing. How can you make mass transit a more positive and pleasant experience and share with others instead of just sitting through your mass transit? Or mobility and sharing, managing risks, in public areas where you have cars, bikes, scooters, pedestrians, and so on. How? What would be your final word on social cohesiveness? And how do you think behavioral sciences can contribute to making living together better and easier? Well, last question, tough question. We have an experiment on crossroads, how to cross a road. If you're a vulnerable person, if you're a pedestrian, or if you're a cyclist, or if you have a scooter, the fact is that there are rules, but rules are difficult to change. And in practice, what we find is that many rules are not followed, and we're really struggling to get rules followed. So we try to bypass this by implementing nudges to improve the way people behave, and even then we are fighting against rules that have been implemented, that have been created, because people have divergent interests. It's complicated to change rules. In mass transit, I think a bit like with the planets, there are a lot of good intentions, but when it comes to action, things get complex. And this is where behavioral sciences can help us determine what trigger to push. We are all happy to help someone get a stroller on the train, or do this, do that. But in practice, it doesn't always happen. So we need some triggers to activate something that we all have deep inside. Okay, I think we have 1 minute left. I don't want to look at the clock, because otherwise I know I won't make it. That's a bad nudge, by the way, having a clock right in front of you. Creating common areas is a wonderful initiative, but it doesn't always work. We live in a world where we have less common spaces and where we tend to be more and more individual, more and more self-centered. The fact is that cities are places where people live together, shared by people. So the real question is, what is it today we can share, that we want to share together, and how can behavioral sciences help us? I'm sure they can do a lot for us. I think we really need behavioral sciences. Great. This is it. This is the end of our roundtable. Back to Eric and Ted.
Merci encore.
And thank you again.